Hey everyone, and welcome to a special online connections evening on casting. My name is Josh Lyman, and this is Luke Stone. And earlier yesterday, I made a comment while we were doing Kickstarter Pause. If you're not familiar with Kickstarter Pause, it's basically where we watch videos for Kickstarters, and the goal is to pause Gong Show style in the event of something that takes away. I saw something that was very familiar to me, and the words I used were that I hate it when artists or other people use other people's work and trace. And by doing that, I blatantly, I'm just going to call it what it is I called someone a tracer. In this case, it was Luke. That was not my intention for that 100%. It was the impulse thinking, and I really should have planned that a little bit better. That's the only excuse I will make for my own. These guys had an amazing podcast earlier today. And I just wanted to say thank you again to Luke and Joe and everyone who came on, and first for explaining their process as well as showing the art and crediting the reference for the realism photos that were done. They were actually photographs that were referenced, not comic book art as far as that's concerned. So again, I wanted to publicly say that I am sorry, Luke. Thank you for coming in tonight. I look forward to chatting with you about a few other things tonight as well. But yeah, just short and simple. I'm here to take my licks and listen and just, in a very public passion, sit here and, be apologetic. That's really the only way I can call it right now.
Josh, I appreciate that. I'm a pretty gentle guy, so you're not going to get too many licks out of me. Real classy, you coming on and doing that. It actually was able to, kind of oddly enough, it was my first indie comics biz. A lot of people call it community. It's a business, My first indie comics biz controversy, so it gave me an opportunity to kind of talk a little more about my process and things like that. And I think in the process, it's really kind of creating more of a learning opportunity for people that are either indie creators or indie fans, people that want to get into making their own comics and things like that. I shared a little bit earlier today about what really inspired me to start getting into comics in 2014, 2015, and kind of building from there. And so it was nice to be able to do that. And I was just told my mic's giving me feedback, so there we go. Hopefully
no, that's okay. Like all three of us are like, anyone else getting static? Like I can hear it definitely. And again, guys, I can't stress this enough. If you haven't already, feel free to watch back on the previous podcast as far as that's concerned to get the whole story. But again, I do apologize. And we're going to jump into a few other things based on, Rob and Barry and what they feel like talking about. But I just wanted to take that moment for my own clarification for every single person watching. If you are unclear on what the concept of tracing is, pure and simple, tracing is when you take a photograph, you take a illustration, you take any form of anything, and you basically just go over it. Now, the irony is, as far as like comic books and animation and things like that, there are considered justifiable versions of doing this. There's something that's been around since Disney called rotoscoping, in which what happens is you film an actor, you have them do something, and then you go over that film, every film per strip blown up, and you draw over it. And this is done so that it makes things faster for production. But when you go down to it, rotoscoping is still in a format, it's tracing, but they still come up with a creation. Now, when it comes to comic books and things like that, it's very cut and dry. It's taking someone else's artwork or photo and going directly over it and going line for line. There are a lot of gray areas as far as like, okay, here's a penciler, here's an inker, here's a ghost writer, a ghost artist or a layout artist, as far as those are concerned. And then somebody will go and ink or pencil over those, or filler artists. Some of the bigger names in our industry have had those. You can go and do that research on your own time, as far as that's concerned. And then, of course, homage and drawn afters, in which in that case, you're purposely referencing and paying tribute to a piece, but you're creating your own piece. But again, more importantly, you're not just going over it line for line and tracing. In the world of fan art and comic books and things like that, there's always going to be so many different people that do different styles. We have silhouette drawings and we have other things like that. That's a whole topic for another day. We're going to wait until after the crises are over for that to distinguish what is what. But again, I can't stress this enough. Luke is not a tracer. I blatantly come to terms with my mistake. I chose the wrong words, and I look forward personally to see something. And probably in the next 20 minutes or so, I'm going to have something for him as an extra apology. So I guess, Rob, Marion, Eric, let's jump on into it.
Well, Josh, first, I just want to say, very classy. I agree with what Luke said before. And this is how it should work, guys, in this industry. People have a problem with each other. They talk to each other. They don't start Twitter wars. They don't call each other names. This is how gentlemen act, and this is a business that should be about gentlemen and gentlewomen going forward. No more of the child bullshit.
It's how the grown-ups behave.
Yeah, exactly. This is the grown-ups table. This is the creators round table. It's not how anything's done. We do call people out when we feel they have to be called out. But we do so with facts, not feelings. So please learn from this occasion. Both of them have done an amazing job. Luke, I can hear you better.
Good.
No feedback.
Better.
Yeah.
It's probably the iPhone headphones were catching you're on it as well.
My good ones broke, and I'm in the middle of this quarantine, and I can't go buy any new ones. So my good headphones broke, so I thought I'd try to use these tonight. But you know what? We're just gonna go headphoneless.
Hey, you know what? Applaud. That's why I got these. Same thing. It's like, so sound right next to my ears.
Now, did you guys want to touch on anything today more about the process of art or anything like that? I'm open to anything, but let's do some intros. Let's go around the room and do some intros. Josh, why don't we start with you, and then we'll move around. And
Well, I was going to say, let's start off with Luke, because I am
there we go.
Okay, yeah, my name is Luke Stone. I am the writer-creator of Hybrids, the Sons of Gods, right there. You can see those guys back there. You can find me on Twitter at Luke Stone Studio. You can find me on Facebook at Luke Stone Studios. And you can also find me on just my website at lukestonestudios.com. I have an Instagram, but you have to go through the website to find it because I don't post there very often. So I have been writing and drawing comics now for a while. And earlier today, I was able to share kind of some of the story of why I got into it and what really inspired me. And so hopefully tonight we can talk about that even a little bit more.
Plug it away. Let's make it happen.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, Josh, it's nice to meet you officially, and no hard feelings. It was a great opportunity actually to kind of create a learning moment for some people that maybe don't know much about the process of making comics and what all goes into it. Because there's a lot that goes into, making comics and art and things like that, and trying to take this idea from just something we have in our heads to making it real. So.
What do you mean? I was told this is so easy to do. Anyone could do it, right, Travis Gibb?
Yes, anybody can do it. It's super easy. Is that what we're talking about? Because yes, that is correct.
We are.
You want me to introduce myself? I assume, or do you want me to get into the controversy? Because I can discuss it.
No, just introduce yourself. You're in enough trouble already lately.
Are you sure? Because I have no problem.
You're in trouble because of Marcel, so you need less battles.
I'm ready to fight some battles. Let's fight. Luke, I've seen that cover. It's Evangeline number 7. I'm just making it up. I don't know. But no, it is an Evangeline cover, so I know what Josh is talking about. That angel pose is like an Evangeline cover. That's what he's referring to. I've seen that pose with a superhero before. So that's what he was talking about. So as someone who reads a lot of comics, trust me, but it's all good. I don't care. I don't believe he traced.
I don't think he did. I 100%. I want to emphasize that again. Did not trace. He did not trace. He showed his work, showed his proofings.
The only tracer is Banky Edwards. He's a tracer.
Well, and then Rob Granito and a few others. That's a whole rabbit hole we can go down later.
Wow,
there's a name I haven't heard in a million years.
Yeah, right. Let's throw that back. There you go, Luke. Remember that?
Who are you?
Banky Edwards is a character from Chasing Amy.
Yes, I'm aware. In fact, I apologize using Chasing Amy as a reference.
You're gonna get me canceled from that. That's bad now. Don't you know that?
I'm Travis Gibb, writer of Broke Down and 4 Dead Bodies and tons of other cool things. I happen to be working on a couple things I've got back here. That's from Y-Faith. This is from Cthulhu's Hard to Spell #2. This is from Reapers from the Avocator. What was that? What edition was that, Rob? Halloween? What was it? Fall?
Halloween.
Fall, yeah.
Halloween.
So all sorts of stuff that I'm working on and doing some cool things. So we'll talk about those. Hopefully, we'll talk about some new projects that I'm announcing today, and I'm working on some stuff right now for Luke. That's what I'm doing currently. I'm writing.
All right, and we have the Hodgson with us, and he's on his new internet, so we should have a seamless video today.
Yeah, I've picked up a new skill. I now know how to create network cables and wire a house for networking.
He knows how to drag it up through one floor to the next.
Yeah. It took 2 holes in the wall to get it right because one of the things about being a homeowner and having a home that's, not, you didn't build it yourself. And every time you open up the walls, you make discoveries. So no dead bodies, no cash, but
man,
some poor architectural choices definitely were discovered.
All of the Nazis moved to Detroit, Michigan after the war.
I've never seen you in high def before, man. Right?
HD live with a fiber optic network, so I ain't crashing anytime soon.
So, besides being a cable installer, who are you?
Well, my name is Eric Hodgson. I am the Dreaded Dinosaur. You can find me at Dreaded Dinosaur on all of your social medias. Who is Dreaded Dinosaur? Well, the Dreaded Dinosaur Man is a really cool webtoon that you can go subscribe to right now, which I will be posting new updates shortly. I'm also the creator of Roddy Piper and the Kilted Avenger with my buddy Dom Riggio from Mess Bucket Comics. That will be coming out soon, hopefully around summer. And did indie comics starting back in 2005 with my first company, Melby Comics. And I am ready to tell a bunch of more stories now.
And we have the Professor, Varian the Kid Grant, reading his penciling book. Now, I'm not sure if it's frozen. Or
it is. It's frozen. Okay. It's frozen at an appropriate time. I was checking.
Varian, I got to give you some credit, man. You've been making comic books for so long. It's great to see you finally learning how.
Yeah. It took a while. I've been reading book on penciling because apparently I didn't know how to do it right. And here we go. Hello, everybody out there. I'm Varian Grant. I've been making comics for a long, long time. 2008, my first book out. It was a black and white interior book. I created it, but I did not draw it. Pretty weird. But now I'm fully capable of drawing now. So I was drawing then, but I just was being lazy. So I'm also the owner of Indie Volt Media, LLC, which is puts a spotlight on indie creators and people who make comics, except for Eric Hodgson. We don't cover him on our show. We're too small of a network for Eric.
What's that?
We're too small of a network for Eric.
Oh, yeah. I've recorded like 3 different shows now that you've failed to edit, put together, and post.
Yeah. And you know what's funny? What's funny is that it's a running joke with Randy and I. I built my computer. I built it, and one of the main problems is that my camera is 4K. The camera I'm shooting with, but StreamYard does not work with my camera, so it's constantly freezing. And sometimes I can do a whole show and it's great. Other days, not so much. And today is one of those days where I'm gonna have a problem.
Sounds like you have an Apple computer.
No, I built it. I built it from scratch. I'm actually running Linux, but it's rough.
Is this a brand new build?
No. It's just the one I keep Frankensteining together.
I just learned about something called Optane. It goes in your M2 slot, and it's basically a cache for large files. And it's really good for working with large video files or 3D rendering stuff. Anywhere where you need to dump off large amounts of data, but you don't want to clog up your temporary RAM. So it like streamlines the process and kind of caches that, so you have an immediate experience.
Cool. I'll have to check that out.
And Josh, it's your turn.
Oh, hello, everyone. My name is Josh Lyman. You can find me on the web at Art of Josh Lyman on Instagram and Facebook, and soon to be other things. More information on that as it follows. My claim to quote unquote mediocrity is I've been in the comic book industry for at least the last decade and a half. I have worked with Aspen. I've worked briefly with other projects, including Voltron and things like that. I've worked independent card sets. like everybody else here, probably as far as that's concerned. I've worked numerous indie comic books as the sequentials as well as covers for that. Not to tell anything, but I will be working on an issue of Dreaded Dinosaur. I just need to actually finish it out and be super critical to Eric on his writing, at least before his writing script program. But that's one of the benefits of this industry is we all try to be friends and joke about that. And I am the mule for the evening, so feel free to throw in your comments if you didn't get into those before.
Well, instead of making comments like that, let's talk about the process of rendering. Well, not rendering. Rendering's a wrong word. I'm not an artist. I'm a writer. So I take pictures, I hand them to my artist, and I say, make it look like this. I didn't realize how much there was this whole photo reference and tracing. You guys want to have a conversation about that and then switch after that to talking about our origins and then announcing some projects we're all working on. I think that'd make a pretty cool round to create around tonight.
I think that sounds fun, Rob.
All right, so let's jump into it. I'm a dumbass, so I don't really need to be talking much. You guys are the artists. I'm going to let it be for you. And Travis, you can jump in too because I know you work with a lot of artists. I'm just going to sit back and learn. So, Luke, take it away. Start it off.
You should introduce you. Nobody knows who you are.
Everyone knows who I am. I'm the guy who's beating up Marcel Dupree next week on Tuesday.
They don't want to say his name because he'll show up in chats.
Yes.
Hey, I think it'd be great if he shows up in chats.
You call me out on a video.
Let's be really honest. Everybody loves a good controversy. I mean, that's why everyone's watching that Tiger King, right? I mean, we're eating that up. We're sucking on that thing.
I am not watching Tiger King, and I am proud as an American to say I'm not watching that.
You know what?
You're wrestling without the fans there, Eric. For your,
you're just playing into the ploy of
2x4
Carol Baskin, Eric.
versus the splinter in your eye. Just saying.
See, this week has been really good from Marcel Dupree and me, and we haven't had a good weekend forever.
Can we switch this to be everybody else? Because I'm John, and
Rob
I really
forgets
want to make
that a lot.
contact.
It's spotlight on Josh's face day.
Yeah.
Like I'm not that pretty looking, especially with the lighting.
One of
right
you
now.
guys is lagging, so I have to wait for the program to catch up.
It's all good.
It is not me.
No, it's not actually. It's not
Call
how
yourself a creator.
Ironically, I think it's me lagging. Out of all people, it's me lagging today.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I saw everyone go away for a second because I hit the button. So my fault. I apologize. I was trying to get it there, but go ahead. Let's,
All right, let's talk about the process of art and drawing. I'm a firm believer that if you've got to challenge yourself if you're going to get better. I've actually, and I'm not going to name any names, but there's an artist that I'm familiar with on some of the forums and the different pages on Facebook. And this person is very consistent about putting out books. I mean, he's always drawing comics, always drawing, working on his title. But I've noticed, and I made a comment to someone the other day. I said, look, the work 5 years ago is the same as it is today. There's really no improvement or any growth in his work whatsoever. And I don't want to be like that kind of guy that doesn't grow. You know, I want to make sure that I'm constantly improving. And I think the only way that you can improve and that's whether you're writing or whether you're drawing or anything like that. I know we've got a couple artists here as well that they can speak to this. But you've got to challenge yourself in drawing something that you're not used to drawing or not necessarily good at drawing. Now, I don't have a Rolodex in my head of all the things that I've ever seen. I don't have a photographic memory like some people do. But in order to draw certain things, I've got to be able to see it, you know. And so references, even before comics, references has always been a vital part of the art process for me. When I started learning how to draw comic books, it was, you know, mentors and people telling me, well, use references and photo references. For facial expressions, I would sometimes use a mirror. I would like, okay, well, let's pull up a little mirror and see what the facial expression would look like if I did this. Because you want to make sure you're getting all those little things done there. Yeah, Rob can't draw. So sorry, Bob. But you can write, so that's good. You give us artists something to draw.
Kenny?
So the process of using those things are I think it's vital to the art process, but sometimes they can become a crutch, you know. And with the new digital age, I don't know about anyone else here. I've seen Varian draw, and he draws traditional still, I believe, but I draw on a tablet, and I'm a graphics display tablet. And so it's really easy to grab a Google image and throw it down on a layer in your art page and trace it and actually do a full-on trace. And, I've seen people do, to varying degrees, I've seen people do things like that where it's, where they'll just do like the outlines or the stick figure or whatever to kind of get that going. And I can see that for speed and things like that. But then some people will just go all out and do like homage covers, like Josh was saying earlier, and they'll just do a complete trace of it. And basically they've just drawn their character over near the same lines as the original artist. And I've seen those floating around where people are trying to call them out on that. And it can get ugly, and it can be tough, to police everybody. But at the end of the day, I think reference photos are probably essential for any artist that wants to get better.
Yeah, certainly there's a whole different tool set of processes. And as technology evolves, we just get more and more tools. Now, those tools, it's all in how you use them. It's not, like I've got a Wacom Cintiq in front of me and my iPad in the bedroom. Those are just tools. What I do with them and the end result, that's what's important. And the process to get there, well, that's between the artist and the tools. And if there's I don't know, I guess you could say kind of like how chefs protect their recipes. They don't want to let the secret sauce out. Mm-hmm. Some people are very protective of how they make things. Myself, for example, I really enjoy, like with Dreaded Dinosaur Man, it's all coming straight out of my head, but there comes a time where perspectives need to be correct. I'm a stickler for anatomy, and so it's to the anatomy books, it's to photos. I'm not super familiar with the controversy, although I got caught up a little bit, but I do have this thing sitting here that I was fortunate enough to get off of their Kickstarter, the Cincy stock book. And it's a great traveling companion of really good reference photos of poses. And one of my personal hangups is I can't think of a pose. Like I'll just keep like redoing it over and over and over and over again. And when you're in one of those, a time crunch, you need to figure it out as fast as you can. And stuff like photo reference, modeling programs like Poser really help to understand the depth of the character, thinking in terms of 3 dimensions. Another great tool to use is to actually start sculpting with some Milliput or some Super Sculpting or something, just so you start training your brain to think in 3 dimensions. And going back to something Luke said about the Rolodex in your head, that's something you build up over time. Look at some artists that are really great at drawing pinups. Ask them to draw a dude sometimes, and it may not turn out so good because they've got a huge inventory of female images rattling around in their brain. But when it comes to something like a 1986 telephone, you're probably going to need to look that up on Google and figure out what it looks like in 3 dimensions before they accurately can represent it.
True.
Yeah. And then when it comes down to that, it's just practice, 100% practice, repetition. Comes down to drawing a circle, comes down to drawing horns, how to, draw a hair, how you chose to represent that. It's going to take practice and time to learn. One of the things that Luke was touching on, as well as Eric briefly, 3D models are kind of a thing now where it's like super, everybody will use that and they'll pose the model and then they'll do a gesture over that model and do that. And there's a really fine line when it comes to doing it that way, as far as like when you're doing posing. Like it's great to take that drawing and then kind of outline it in that tracing method. That's where this gets tricky. But then get rid of the original drawing and look at your gestures and try to draw your gesture again. And that comes down to the repetition. That's one of those super ridiculously gray areas when it comes to anything like that. Like nowadays, web comics and things like that, the easiest way to have a guaranteed set is to generate one in 3D and then just pose it every single time for every single set that you need to do with that panel, and just move it so that you already have your character illustrations, but then you just take the set and you move it to fit to the angle that you need and draw over the set that you created. That, like I said, it's a very, very, very tight line to walk as far as those are concerned. But again, Luke's right. Models, as far as that's concerned, doesn't matter if they're 3D or they're human or they're from real life. Here's an apple. Here's a tree. Here's the lamp post on Fifth next to the post office, to use Travis's Chasing Amy reference. It's going to be one of those things where you have to find what that line is going to be of what's acceptable. I will obviously do my warm-ups and I will look at reference. I have an entire catalog of reference for art, for costumes, for characters that are drawn by other people. If somebody says, hey, draw a Ninja Turtle, I'm going to go, what kind of Ninja Turtle? Do you want the movie version? Do you want the cartoon version? Do you want my version, or do you want the comics? I can go on about that. But
Neil Adams has a very interesting video about quote unquote tracing. And if you haven't found it, it talks about tracing Kevin Smith for the Fat Man image that he did. So that's something interesting to look at. And even a guy like Norman Rockwell, he talks about Norman Rockwell a lot in that, and the fact that he worked from photographs, and people were like, by the time that people got on to working with photographs, he was working with a projector. He would take photographs and then project the photographs onto the canvas and do his initial sketch of it and then paint that. And and that got a lot of flack, but he was able to work so much more quickly. And I think that kind of what Eric was saying, these are tools, and they allow you to work a little more quickly in things instead of sitting there for hours looking at like, okay, what pose is going to look dynamic or interesting. It gives you some other options to do that. One of the things that Rob always says is that there's no such thing as writer's block. And those writers have that, artists get it too. Like we get in those creative slumps. Mm-hmm. And I have a couple of tools to do that. First, it's like an entire catalog of different pose references to spark my creativity. And the other thing is, because I draw so much and try to move so quickly, I get real bored. I have ADHD, so I get really bored with the tedious stuff. And for me, the most tedious thing to do is sit there and try to figure out how I want to lay out my page. Well, I have an artist friend who does his own comics and stuff, but I always loved his layouts, and they looked really good. And I started doing this early on because I was drawing 2 comics at once, and I had, in order to draw and be able to put books out in the order at the speed at which I wanted to do that, I had to have some help. And every colorist that colors a lot of pages, they use a flatter. And if I'm going to draw a lot of panels, well, I was like, well, what's the equivalent of that? And it's a layout artist. It's someone to create the thumbnails for me. So I'm not thinking how many frames, where do I want to put the frames at, and then second guess every decision that I make for this panel and that panel and here and there. And so I got this guy. I was using one guy for a while, and then I started using this guy named Brian Dawson because he's really good at it. That seems to be the easiest thing for him to do. And he likes to get paid for it, and I like to pay him for it. So it's like, it puts money, like he can lay out an entire book for me in just a number of days. And then I can get to drawing, and I can do 7-8 pages a week in art because I'm not spending all this time worrying about the layout and second guessing. If I like what he did, I use it. If I don't like what he did, I change the pose, I change the frame, the panel, and all that kind of stuff. So, but it allows me to not get into that rut, that creative rut. And I don't know if you guys ever have dealt with this, but when you start realizing, wow, all of my pages are looking the same. Mm-hmm. I always do this particular camera angle here and that particular camera angle here, and I'm starting to get into a routine and a rut of doing the same things, and it's not looking very dynamic. And I know that it helped me to get out of those ruts and to help me move forward creatively and to be able to stay in the process of actually drawing and creating. And then, like I said, there's times when I'm like, I don't really like that choice. I think it would look better like this in my head. And so then I'll just do a complete redo. Like the last book that I did, not the issue 5, but issue 4, the last 6 pages, I didn't like what the layout artist did. I mean, I'd already paid for it, but so there was $60 down the drain because I was paying him $10 a page for that. But I wound up just redoing all of them because I was like, I had a different vision in my head for it, and then I would play around with the layouts, and but his idea, the way he interpreted my script, it gave me that creative juice that I needed to go in and just redo that because it made me think, oh, I would like to see this instead of that. And so it's a nice place to launch from. And so. But I do give my layout artists credit. They're my layout pencils and stuff like that. And so I think it's all part of the creative team. Most people don't give their flatter reference, or credit. I will credit my flatter. I'm like, hey, he did a good job for me. Sped this process up for me. So appreciate it.
Yeah, there's a right and a wrong way to do just about everything. And one of the things is that if you're going to use tracing as one of your tools to get your job done, the wrong way to do it is for the tracing to be the final product. The right way to do it is to make that your base, just like Luke is saying with his layout guy. He's not going to just copy word for word the layout pencils that he gets. He's going to make them his own. He's going to draw on top of them. He's going to rework them and do the same thing. If you get a Sports Illustrated swimsuit magazine cover that you really like for a pinup, i.e. Greg Land,
Greg Land, yes.
You gotta make it yours in the end. If it's just everything is like hanging off of your trace, then you're doing it wrong and you don't really know what you're doing. It's just got to be like a rough starting point of, hey, I've got the proportions where I need them. Now, how can I push those proportions? How can I get that dynamicism? Because if it's a trace of a photo, it's going to flatten out. And if you look at the process that someone like Alex Ross does, he photographs all of his own work, but the dynamicism is all of his own, and it's going on top of that rough structure that he's getting off of the photograph. Like if I was to do, something like this from a 3D rendering or from a photograph, it's going to flatten out. And because of the way cameras work, the way perspectives work, on the drawn page, the hand is going to look rinky-dink. It's not coming at you. You need to add that dynamicism of how you're going to squash and stretch and push and pull the pose in order for it to be energetic and readable. So yeah, if you're using it as a part of your tool set, that's your beginning, that's your base, and then you've got to really work it and get it and make it your own language at the end.
Yeah, absolutely. There's this thing that I'll do. So I work with multiple monitors. I can't afford a Wacom, but I've got one of these XP pens. So we're just looking at who's on the. So now you get the idea what kind of budget I'm working with here.
Hey, those Furrion ones are really good too.
They really are, yeah. And so I've got 3 monitors set up. I've got my main monitor in front of me. I've got my drawing tablet down here, and then I've got my other monitor that I use to have things up on. And so I will actually do I'll do a reference. And because I kind of come from this place mentally where I don't actually want to do even some of those structure drawings off of it, so I'll just throw a reference photo up and then I'll draw the reference photo. I'll like, okay, look over at there, and then, okay, I'll draw it. And then I'm like, okay, did I get that right? It's something I learned on really early in going to art classes and things like that, is that I have an aptitude for being able to copy an image in front of me or be able to draw something that I see. There might be a few erase lines, but thank God for digital. I'm not running through a bunch of paper and pencils and ink and stuff now like I used to. But I find that, doing that and being able to see that, and, Josh, you're right you need to learn those gestures. Like I know that when I draw it, I do that. And I always like to embellish a little bit, unless I'm trying to make something look really kind of almost photorealistic, but normal proportions. As I start getting into the comic pages, I tend to be more expressive with that. And over the course of the book Hybrids, over these 5 issues, which basically took about 4 or 5 years to do at this point, because I had like a 2-year break in between. I noticed like trying to work out faces and facial expressions and how that evolved over time, because you're always trying to evolve, like, okay, this is going to be my feel, my style. Yeah. And I really started getting into like, I started noticing I would start doing some of my gestures would look more like some Hellboy stuff, big chins and things like that. And I kind of like those. And then when Brian started doing some of the layouts, he kind of draws with that kind of that facial framework there. And so there was a couple of frames where he threw in the faces, and like when he would do like close with a face. And so it had like that real, like expressive fat, like hero chin and stuff. And I'm like, it's like, I could change that, but I kind of like it. Yeah, exactly, Eric. You know what I'm talking. I'm like, I kind of like that. So I wound up like using a lot of his pencil, and then I said, dude, by the time I'm done with this issue, I'm going to be drawing faces like you. I just know it. And sure enough, I did some character design for some people, and I was like, oh crap, I'm drawing faces like Brian now because I just liked the way he did it so much, and it was already kind of starting to lean in that direction. And but yeah, these real expressive like mouths and stuff, and I'm like, that's really cool. I like that.
Our influences tend to stick with us too. Like there isn't a piece of chrome or a gauntlet that I haven't drawn where I haven't started thinking about how Bob Layton might show those reflections and stuff because he's one of my big influences. And I always gravitate towards wanting to do small little detail lines. With Dreaded Dinosaur Man, I'm doing more, that's my cartoon style. That's a specific style I developed just for those characters. But when other stuff that I like to do, my influences are all 60s and 70s era Marvel. So I tend to kind of have a little bit of a Kirby influence to Mishima and Ditko. Some of those older influences are still there. Something by like Barry Windsor Smith, I always looked at as like, okay, that's drawing as a real like fine art form with all those small details. And that's something that I still am trying to stretch myself behind the scenes, is to get into a new style that's more of that highly detailed line work with all those small little pieces and cross hatches and stuff. There's a lot of those things I'm still in the process of learning. Just to bounce off the word learning, one of the things that in my background is I have a master's in art education, and I did teaching for a while, and I developed coursework, which is actually a curriculum that I want to divide. I actually want to bring this out and make it as a like a homeschooling for art teaching and stuff like in that realm maybe. But I developed this curriculum because I had young 6th grade kids. They all loved comics. They all loved video games. They loved Sonic the Hedgehog. Well, I had one kid that was a real big Sonic fan. But they were all inner city kids. So it was, they had a lot of stuff going on at home. So my classroom had to be a place where they would be able to relax and be able to explore these things creatively. But a lot of them came into some frustrations about not being able to draw what they wanted. And I did things that I didn't learn until college, certain drills and stuff. And so part of my curriculum has them using tracing paper. And we did in the classroom tracing paper, but you can easily do this if you have a graphics tablet or something, is to work out the forms of a photo with basic shapes. And we would do drills with this. And the reason behind this is it's a way of training your brain to think and break down complex objects in 3 dimensions. And whenever I come into somebody's like, oh, I can't draw, I can't even draw a stick figure. You got a stick figure, you can start there. That's mine. Then you've got the elements and principles of design. You got this, I called it my toolbox. You had your mental tools, which were the elements and principles of design. And you had your physical tools. And I kind of broke it down, taught them how to use the physical tools correctly, taught them about the mental tools. And this meant this drilling of tracing over stuff and not tracing the actual image, but breaking this shape down into cylinders and spheres, things that are easy to understand when you're starting out. That really helped them learn how to draw. And there's other processes. I had a whole, I went to school with automotive designers, and there's a whole school of just using a design method where you put everything into a box. So you become an expert at drawing boxes in perspective first. And then you learn how to break down the box into more boxes, and you're basically learning how to lay out complex grids. This is how all my automotive design buddies learn how to draw. So I started teaching those types of skills to these kids, and I started seeing a huge improvement, especially the ones that applied themselves, going from your typical 6th, 7th grader age drawing to something that might look like a high schooler trying to figure out if they want to go to design school or not, because they were using these grids and methods. And just to kind of wrap up this rabbit trail I went on, the main reason I did that is my biggest complaint going through school. I had teacher after teacher who just wanted me to feel the damn thing out and figure it out with my feelings.
Come on, Eric. Just draw the fruit.
I wanted knowledge. I didn't want to draw a bunch of gourds, and just feel my way through it. I wanted technique. I wanted knowledge. I wanted process, to learn process. And I basically just had to pull it out of the design students because my fine art teachers they were all a bunch of old hippies, and I would look at some of the other. There was one teacher, I forget his name, but he had people learning how to shade using microscopic ovals. Not a single straight line was allowed to be drawn. It was just doing this and building up all the tones. I didn't get that. I had to learn that on my own. So when I had my students in these middle school classes, I was bound and determined to start a foundation of actual skills, not all this artsy-fartsy BS.
Yeah, I had some really good teachers along the way. In fact, as you're talking about the influences, does anybody know the name Mike Zeck by chance? I mean,
Mike.
Does that ring a bell? Yeah. So the first comic book I ever saw was some Mike Zeck work from the Secret Wars, and I remember my dad brought home a comic for me. A friend of his at work had said, "Hey, I know your son's into drawing. Maybe he'll like these comic books." And it was the cover where Hulk was there holding up all this Earth, and saving all these heroes that are even bad. Yeah. And I would take pieces of paper and draw over that, trying to figure out how to make those strokes and those things like that. And Hulk quickly became my favorite character. And so when people's like, I think there's some Hulk influence in Trash Man. Heck yeah, there's definitely Hulk influence in Trash Man. Hulk is by far one of my favorite characters, and but just I remember that, and I try to do that. And now even today, when I go back and I look at some of Mike's work, I'm like, oh man, I'm still doing that gesture. I'm still drawing like that. I still have that piece in there. I still draw the pieces of anatomy like he does, and some of these poses like he does, because it just ingrains in you. And my shading, whenever I'm doing realistic shading, I do the ovals, because I had an art teacher that says never use a smudger and never use straight lines, use ovals. And so whenever I do some shading, people's like, wow, that's amazing. And I'm like, yeah, I didn't come up with it on my own. I was taught this process and this technique, and it works. But and I think there's a lot that we can learn from some of the other masters and people doing it. And that's why, the penciling or the inking the Marvel way or things like that. When I really started doing digital, I went to that DC digital drawing, the DC way. The guy that does, I think Robin, that did Robin, did the book or whatever. And so I got that book, and I was like, okay, well, how do they do it? And building models with, line buildings, and how you do all these massive things without cheating. Because when I draw digital, I want it to look like I've drawn traditional. I don't want to just take a line and then manipulate it. I want to draw an actual line. And so, all of those resources that's out there are helpful, I think, to the end result. Because at the end, what we're trying to do is tell a story. Travis writes a story. He says, Luke, I want you to draw the story. I'm supposed to draw the story, and whatever he's thought, I need to reproduce.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing, right? So as a writer, like, I struggle with what I think is good versus what other people think is good. So I've submitted stuff, and they've been like, hey, I love your story, but I don't necessarily love your art. And that's really interesting, because I'm like, oh, I think it's really good. This is what I like. But sometimes you got to figure out what the masses like and what that looks like, because everybody's got styles. I mean, when you first talk, Luke, about people getting better, I wanted to show this. If you want to bring me up, Rob, a little bit, so I'm full. This is George Perez, both 2001 and then 2014. As you can see, they're drastically different. You could both tell they're Perez, but one was clearly speed done. One was him not speed done. But it's really interesting how he's gotten better in certain respects, and worse in other respects as he aged. And I find that really fascinating as we do something, and as artists, especially people who do comic books, if they don't evolve what you see in the products you get from them.
Yeah, and art's so subjective too. When you start thinking about it, let's use Jack Kirby as an example. Right now, I think most of us here will be like, we give Jack Kirby the respect that he deserves because he's freaking Jack Kirby. He's Jack the King Kirby for a reason. But I remember early on, people were like, "Oh, Jack Kirby, he sucks," and I'm like, Why does he suck? Well, he's blocky and his anatomy doesn't make sense. And I'm like freaking Jack Kirby's awesome. I don't know what you're talking about.
He was on, let him.
But the thing about Kirby, and we can just talk about style in general, is it doesn't have to look realistic as long as it's believable. And so, for example, with Kirby and maybe some other cartoons and stuff where we've got some really distorted stuff, like even something like Samurai Jack, for example, which is very blocky. Mm-hmm. It works because you could imagine that character has an anatomy, a skeletal structure, proportion, balance, all of those things. So as long as those correct foundations are there, the style will work. Now, if you don't have those correct foundations, there's an artist buddy that I know that I'm not going to name any names, but I like to critique him. Between Varian and I, we kind of go back and forth, and we critique this guy. And one of the things that I've noticed over time is that he is stuck on this style that came out in the 90s, but the back end stuff is where everything is going wrong, because you'll see a thigh that looks like a giant square tree branch, and it's not showing any depth. But to his eye, he thinks it's good, and it's got that style layer on top of it, where the thickness and thinness of the lines, a certain way you're drawing the eyes. He's really good at faces for the most part, as long as they're in certain static type. There's a few artists out there who can only draw the same face over and over and over and over again. You try to get that emotion and dynamicism out of them, they're going to break like a rock because they're stuck in that stylistic mode, and it's just this nice veneer over bad anatomy and all this other stuff. So one of my pet peeves, and it's something that we're never going to overcome, your average consumer cannot see that and make those breakdowns in their minds. So whenever I'm at an art table and I see somebody who spent $30-$40 on some god-awful masterpiece, I'm like, why can't you see that? What the hand is off, that it looks like it has 6 fingers in that one fist. I'm thinking all these things, and I'm starting to kind of get frustrated in my mind because I'm such a big stickler with proportions and anatomy. But I don't often realize that the person buying it, they're just happy because it's a cool looking piece, and they don't see those errors. They don't see those style without substance. They're just happy about it. So those are the type of situations I just got to let that go. That person's happy. I'm happy for them. That's great. You're never going to educate the populace as to all the things that we've spent a lifetime learning.
Yeah, and art's so subjective too. And that's the thing. It's not for everybody. I know I'm trying to, I have tried to have my own style, and I know it's not for everybody. And, just like most artists, it's like, oh, well, I like it or I don't like it. And, I certainly don't want to be, I would rather have people either love me or hate me than people just be like, it's okay.
Yeah, you definitely don't want to be kind of that. You don't want somebody to walk away from your table thinking they bought your book out of pity, or they bought your print out of pity. You want them to enjoy it, regardless of your skill level. If you're producing something that people enjoy, and this is one of the things I drilled over and over with my kids, because they would, children are really hard on themselves when they're trying to draw. I know I was. I'm sure you were. I'm sure Josh was. You're always going to be your own worst critic. And what I would tell them is like, this is a successful drawing because I can tell that this is a Barrett 50 caliber. I had this one kid, the only connection I could make with him was Call of Duty. So I let him do anything Call of Duty wise. This kid who was getting a straight D in my class made a life-size sculpture of a Barrett 50 caliber out of 8.5 by 11 paper, some tape, and a stapler.
Wow.
And I gave that kid an A for that semester because he put all that work into that. And I told him that, and I said, look, you showed me that you're capable. You did something very impressive because you were properly motivated. And I tried to let him carry that off. It's like, I'm rewarding you with a passing grade this semester because I see that you are capable of doing this. Trying to give him that positive influence and that reward. But I forgot what I trailed off on, so I'll just shut up.
It's inspiration in art, things like that.
Yeah, well, my art teacher is coming out of me, and so I want to start lecturing, and I need to stop because
never let anybody pity buy. One of the techniques that my parents taught me while learning to draw and things like that was, yes, of course you can draw and you can create, but you need to be able to try to listen to people while you're doing that. So one of the things, there's ranting to my methodology here, is while we've been sitting here and I've been listening, I have been drawing because I need the warm-up time. Thank you, Rob. Appreciate that. And I promised that there was going to be something towards the middle to whatever have you for this. So there'll be some tweaking that needs to be done.
Sweet, Azazel.
Yeah,
Hey, that's beautiful.
I'll be making
Dude,
some scans and everything so you can see the line work and everything, but you can give that away as part of your thing if you want. You're more than welcome.
Yeah, absolutely, man. That's awesome. I love it.
But
I think that's part of one of my favorite things about creating is seeing other people's artistic expression of the things that I come up with. One of I think I like to spend more time talking about the process of making comics, sometimes even than my own comic, I do get excited about the story, the characters, the development of the characters and the world. But, in the end, today when we did the rebuttal video, I had an opportunity to share like, hey, this is the process for creating a comic and kind of going through the art process that not a lot of people get to see that. And not a lot of people get to hear us talk about what goes into making our stories, making our books, making, and even getting to the point to where you can do sequential art. Now, I always thought that if you could draw a good pinup, you could do sequential art easy. And I learned pretty quick when I started doing sequential art that is not the case. It is hard to reproduce the same face over and over and over again. And even if like you read some of the books that I've got out now in hybrids, you'll notice like, oh, well, it looks a little different. And but I've gotten better. It's a journey of my own progression through things, but you're still trying to tell the story. And so you try your best to tell the story, try your best to be consistent, but you can only get better at sequentials if you're drawing sequentials. That's what I've learned. You can, just like anything else, you can get better at drawing faces if you draw a lot of faces. You can get better at hands if you draw a lot of hands. But if your goal is to tell stories through comic books, then you can only get better at sequentials by drawing sequential. It's the only way to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I remembered the thought where I trailed off on that I wanted to say is that I was teaching my kids that if somebody who doesn't draw can look at your drawing and tell what it is, then your drawing is successful. Doesn't matter if it's a stick figure, doesn't matter, as long as you're communicating your idea visually. And that's another thing I tried to teach them, drawing as a visual language, a visual communication instead of as an art form. It was more of a visual communication. So if your idea can be communicated, it's a successful piece. If somebody is staring at it and I have no idea what this is, then your drawing is not successful. And then have a discussion with that person as why they can't tell. Try to explain to them, try to learn from that and see what you did that kind of broke the ability for them to decipher and read this, and then learn from that. Because drawing is a universal language. Dead air is bad.
All right, I guess with Origins. That just kind of yeah. So let's do some Origins and let's get back to everyone's screen and let's just go around. Let's start off with Travis, who's been abnormally quiet. How did you get into comics and what's your journey been like?
Well, I'm writing. That's why. So much like my boy up there who's drawing, I am writing because I'm super behind on a few scripts. So I'm trying to get some scripts out. And we're doing a few anthologies that I need to write some rules about. So I'm doing some of that stuff in the background. So I've been reading comics all my life. I read them as a small kid. I've shared the story many times. It really taught me right from wrong. I'm a Christian and a pastor now, but back in the day, I was came from a drug and alcohol family. There was lots of horrible things going on in my house. And someone put a comic in my hand and I kept reading them, and I learned my moral values from Peter Parker. I learned, what not to do when drinking from Tony Stark. I learned that some of the things that you say out loud are not the things that are in your head. Um, those things can be separated. So I started doing this in 2003. I come from a film background. I love crime. I love noir. Like you wouldn't know any of my Christian background. Any of if you read any of my books, Broke Down in Four Dead Bodies, there's lots of guns, lots of violence, lots of F words. I like that kind of stuff. That's what I'm into. So that's what I write. So yeah, that's kind of my origin story. Is that what you're looking for, Rob? Or are you looking for a little bit more?
Well, you left comics for a while and came back. I think that's a compelling story, don't you?
Oh yeah. So in 2003, I did comics for a couple years. Got as big as being part as Negative Burns. Does anybody know what Negative Burns is here? Silence.
Negative.
You guys call yourself comic fans. So Negative Burns is where Neil Gaiman came from. Alan Moore, Brian Bendis. A lot of these guys wrote Negative Burns because it was through Caliber and they could write short anthology stories and they would accept you if you were good enough. It was kind of like the lesser 80 to 2000. So if you go look at back issues, you can find some of the best writers and artists who have been doing stuff for the last 20 years in those books. I happen to be in the second to last issue. None of those famous people are in my issue, but that's fine.
Well, this is the 90s. I'm the baby, so I get an exception.
Right. So I was in 2003. I ended up having a kid. I decided that my child is more important than comic books and movies. So I gave it up. I gave it up for a real long time. And then one day I was sitting at home with my second wife. And I just got to be fair and honest. She's awesome. Her name's Heather. She's the best. She's my editor for all my comics. So she's dope. She's got full sleeve Batman tattoos on one side, and then the other side she's got Wonder Woman. All sorts of cool stuff. Anyways, that's irrelevant. She's just cooler than me. So that's what I want to say. I want that very clear that my wife is way cooler than me. She saw that I had a complete comic book, a whole folder of comic books. I had done 2 issues of Broke Down in Four Dead Bodies. And back in the day, I don't know if you guys noticed, 2007 or ish, if you switched artists mid-run, you were dead. You might as well not even put it out. Like nobody's going to buy it. It's not worth doing because we didn't have Kickstarter. We didn't have any of that stuff. So I just trashed it. He had to cancel because he had a kid. I had my own kids to worry about. So we just trashed it. My wife's like, it's really stupid that you have 2 issues of a comic book that you've never produced. And I was like, yeah, that is dumb. So I contacted the guy, said, hey, do you want to finish this? And he said, yeah, let's finish it. So that's what got me back into it. We took those 2 issues, made one really good issue. And then we've been going on since. We just finished funding issue 3. I just completed it. I'm sending it out to everybody. Working on issue 4 to finish up the series. Rob, dead air.
Okay. Did we lose him?
No, you suddenly stopped right when
He's got a little bit of
my kid needed something when Jack said.
That's awesome.
So since this is up here, why don't we get your intro from Luke Stone? How did you get into comics? Tell us about it.
Oh, man. I loved comics from an early age. Like I said, my mom and dad used to go out and hang out with their friends until like 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, this little place called Breakfast House. And they, in order to entertain me, they would just hand me a napkin and a pen. And I started drawing that way. And then my dad brought home a comic book one day and I fell in love with it. Started doing that when I was 13, 14 years old. I remember drawing up some big pinups of some Marvel characters and sent it to Marvel Comics. They were so kind to actually send them back to me with a note saying, hey, keep up the good work. Basically, it was a very nice rejection letter, which I've gotten used to over the years. I've gotten quite a few of those. But I kind of stepped out for a while, because of real life and doing things like that. I'm a musician, so I started really focusing on music more. I had some really cool career opportunities to do that. And then I remember I moved to Florida in late 2014, and we got here in October. And then in November of 2014, I found out that a good friend of mine, Gary Dale, his brother Jeremy, who we all knew and loved, and he was a great artist, and he had been he went into drawing comics professionally, and so we kind of I was just kind of pleased that one of us finally made it into the business, was doing something, and it was kind of always a dream of mine. But you live vicariously through the people that that do it. And but he had gotten sick at a convention, and the con crud turned into something worse, and then turned into something worse, and then he wound up passing away in early November of 2014. And man, that shook me because he was only a few years older than I was, and it got me thinking. And it was really kind of a shot of adrenaline to me that I've done nothing. Like, he actually got a chance to like have published comic books, went to conventions, people bought his work, they were fans of his work, and I've not been able to do any of that. And it really impacted me on a deep mental level. And I had this idea, this concept for a book, and I decided that I was going to find a writer, and I found a guy that wanted to write it because at the point I just thought I was an artist, not a writer. And shopped that book around and got rejected by a lot of people. But somebody said, "Hey, I can tell you're a tenacious individual. You got a lot of tenacity. You're going to make sure that this book comes out." And kind of as a honor, a little bit, a badge of honor to all of those indie creators out there, we started an imprint and we called it Tenacious Comics. And a few of us that had been rejected a lot decided to work together and try to help each other improve our books enough to be able to be produced. And that's when I stumbled across doing the hybrids thing, because we didn't have a superhero comic, because indies weren't really doing superheroes, because this was 2015, 2016, no one wanted any superhero books. And I love zombies, and so unfortunately we're running into the end of kind of the zombie craze, and they were starting to become a trope and a cliche. And and we had this really nice fun. I call it a rom-zom-com. So it's a romantic zombie comedy. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of, I loved it. I still love it. One of these days I was going to make it a trade. But we needed a kind of a superhero title. And I said, we don't really have superheroes. But I had this idea for hybrids, these modern day heroes that are actually the genetic offspring of the Greek gods, which were actually an embellishment of these Nephilim creatures and throughout history. And I pitched the idea to some of the other guys in the what we call the co-op, and they said, "Man, that's really cool. You should write a script." And so I wrote a script for it, not thinking anybody would like it, and they all liked it. And so I drew the comic probably in about a month. Colored it myself. Wasn't real happy with the colors, so I found this guy named Patrick Gamma who did the colors. And then we put it out just to see what would happen. It did really well on Kickstarter, and the first issue did pretty good. So we went ahead and started making a second. And then, as things happen in the indie community, there was trouble in paradise, so to speak. And so that company wound up having to close its doors after a similar situation to Kickstarter money being taken and not being delivered by the person handling the finances, so to speak. So we had a little trouble with that. And so that company closed down after we had to pay for a Kickstarter out of pocket to fulfill. And so I was, at that point, things were kind of rough. I'm a full-time pastor. And so things were kind of rough in a transition at our church. And I kind of was going to just step out of comics for a while. I had issue 2 finished and ready to release, but the company wasn't going to do it. And then Joe Spicer from Starcross got a hold of me, said he wanted to release issue 1. He wanted to re-release the series with Starcross. And so I agreed. And he did all the work. I didn't do anything for issue 1 and issue 2. And I didn't even sell it or promote it. And things finally started settling down. And, I love comics. I really do. And Joe got a hold of me one day and said, "These are doing really well in convention." He goes, "Every time we go, I sell, a handful of these books, and we're not even really trying to sell them. People are just picking them up and looking at them." And he goes, "I want you to think about doing it more." And so things had changed. We had got through the difficult times with our church, and, we're kind of in a new season. And I thought this would be a great time to start drawing again. And the new bit of energy, people are actually reading it and wanting it. And so I started drawing again. And so over the course of the last 12 to 18 months, I've finished 3 issues, which is hard to do when you work full time and have a family. But man, there's such a passion. I have such a passion for doing comics that, I'm going to do it whether people buy it or not, whether they like it or not, but that's just me.
That's a good way to look.
Let's bring in the dreaded dinosaur man.
Hey, how's it going? My origin story is this is the only thing I ever really wanted to do. This is the only thing I ever really did. My only other possible career option pathway, and I wanted to be a meteorologist at one point. But that was the only other thing I had any passion in. And I think the meteorology was just because I lived through 3 tornadoes growing up on a farm in Midwest Missouri. But yeah, all I had was my art. I was ridiculously bullied as a kid. The only time I got any respect, though, was when I was drawing, because all of my bullies would just want to watch me draw. I draw them some nice girly pictures once in a while. I did art for the football team. So that was the only way I got any respect. And that's just kind of where I gravitated. I went away to art school in Detroit, Michigan. I came up here, and one of the things I did while I was in school is I just loved comics. When I was a little kid, my dad gave me his giant box of comics that he had. Unfortunately, all of those famous issues he left in Germany when he was stationed there during Vietnam. He brought the ones he liked, which were all worthless. But I still have that old collection of, mid-tier Spider-Man and Hulk and Iron Man, and that's what really like popped me into comics. And my first comic I ever bought was Iron Man. I forget what number it was. It was him versus U.S. Agent, though. It was a 75-cent book. That was the first one I ever bought off the newsstand, and that's where I immediately fell in love with the line art with Bob Layton, and just really kind of studied how he drew. Caught the 90s craze. Loved Rob Liefeld as a kid. Loved Eric Larson. Spent a lot of time kind of tracing Todd McFarlane, just trying to figure out how they were thinking. And that's pretty much all I did with my time. My parents were very encouraging, although my family was dysfunctional quite a bit. I can remember helping my mom do math in her checkbook when I was in, middle school, and just so we could figure out how to pay groceries and whatnot. So yeah, I grew up on the kind of the wrong side of the tracks after we got out of the farming business. And but so that was kind of like my way out of rural Missouri was, I'm not going to be famous because I'm kind of an artist. So I made my way to Detroit, followed a friend of mine up to art school, and had all of those frustrations I talked about earlier about being in art school and not getting the info that I wanted. I did computer animation as my major because I wanted to make video games. I could still do 3D sculpting and stuff, and I got a 3D printer back there. I want to start making action figures and toys here soon. But comics were always my draw, my kind of always my creative center. And I started doing my Melby comics, which was something that came out of high school. I would take lined artwork paper. I would make comics about me and my friends doing these crazy adventures just as an outlet, so I didn't bring a gun to school and start wasting these bastards. I thought about it once. But anyway, to digress, this was my survival mechanism.
Years later,
I wanted to bring those and make those into actual characters. So in 2005, I started publishing my own comic book, Melby Comics. And the name Melby came from my best friend at the time in high school. His last name was Selby. They called him Melby to make fun of him. They weren't creative people in rural Missouri when they picked on you. But a little bit later on than that, I'll revisit that. But I started publishing my own comic book, and I learned everything from the ground up. I remember I was putting together these pages, mostly scanning them in, cleaning them up in Photoshop. It was a black and white book. These were the I can drag this over. These were the characters. I always did anthologies. I had the zombie bug too. This was World of the Zombies, my zombie story. And then this was the Melby characters. And again, these are all based off of real people. This was based off of me. This is based off of my wife. This was some weird bunny that stabbed things that called Bloat. This was based off my cousin back here. And just told a lot of really bizarre stories. And they never made any money. I had a few fans here and there. I made it to an issue 3 with Melby Comics. Tried relaunching World of the Zombies once or twice, just so I could get into San Diego Comic-Con. And eventually, during this whole time, I was coming into this new reality with scleroderma, which is the disease that I have. It's an autoimmune disease It's one of those things where your body's trying to kill you. It started when I was in college. Early on, I started noticing my fingers were getting sores on the ends of them, and they were becoming painful while I was weightlifting. Side story, I grew up a fat kid, and I was losing all this weight. I was doing bodybuilding in college because some of my roommates did it, so we just did the craze. I was dropping all this weight, and at the same time, this disease really onset on me. And so my fingers would have these giant sores on them that were just starting to become gangrenous at times. And I didn't know why this was happening. Doctors couldn't really tell me why. Well, it was scleroderma, but it was early onset with Raynaud's, which was with the fingers thing. And as I was drawing my first Melby comic book, my fingers were starting to stiffen up. And you can see how claw-like and cringy they are. This is my range of motion here. So my art got progressively worse for a time, but I was still maintaining that I was going to put this book out. So I got the first issue done. I kept drawing at all times because I did not want to lose what I had. I wanted to hang on to it as much as I could. So I pumped out issue 2 pretty quickly. Tried running a company. I brought in a kid that I had found at Wayne State here when I was working on my master's. He drew one of the stories in the second issue. Third issue came around, and I got that done. And then it came to a point where I really wasn't doing very well. It wasn't working. I had to figure out a way for me to earn money. I was newly married. Had to figure out a way to support my wife. She was still in college. So I thought, hey, I'll get this master's. I'll get this teaching certificate, and I'll try teaching for a while. So I dropped out of the comic book scene. I had done a few conventions. I'd went to Minnesota Fall Con. I always did Motor City Comic Con, selling my book. I did Chicago Wizard. Those are pretty much the only shows I did back then. I quit. I focused entirely on being a teacher. I got to a point with that where my illness got so bad, I realized I was going to be a liability to these kids if there was a shelter-in-place situation or a tornado. It was actually during a tornado drill or a fire drill. I almost got trampled on the stairs by my own students because of the way I was stiffening up in my body. Like my knee is super full of arthritis, and I'm kind of like a decrepit skeleton sometimes. But I did not want to be a liability to these kids. So I decided to switch out, and I couldn't do it. It was 10 hours of working, and then coming home and sleeping and waking up and doing it over again. It was starting to depress me. So I just had to pull out of that. And I said, you know what? I'm going to give comic books and art a try again, and started out doing something completely new. Started a web comic called Chad the Fat Kid. Chad was my main bully's name in high school. And I started taking all of these life experiences that I had in high school being bullied, and I turned them into a comic strip. It was on Drunk Duck Comics. It was the number 2 comic for about 3 or 4 weeks in a row during the height of the Drunk Duck webcomics time in the early 2000s. Still up there. If you want to Google it, you can find it, Chad the Fat Kid. Did that for a couple of years, and then tried to do, this is when I relaunched World of the Zombies. That didn't go anywhere. And then just started focusing on art. It's like, you know what? I'm going to try just doing fan art because I had pushed against it for so long because I wanted to be a comic book publisher. And then I started making money with the fan art. And my wife started seeing me actually make more than table, come home, and we could actually pay off some credit cards, pay some bills. So she became much more of an encouragement for me to do the art thing. And so for the last few years, that's how I got to meet Josh. That's how I met Rob, met Travis, met everybody. I have more friends on the outside, in the rest of the country than I do here in Michigan. And using the art to sustain me and build myself back up. My skills have improved. I draw better now than I ever did before I was disabled. And now I'm ready to conquer the world again with my comics and stories. I put Dreaded Dinosaur Man on Webtoon a couple years back, starting that out. My wrestling fan art got the attention of Pro Wrestling Tees in Chicago. That got me the job on Roddy Piper, the Kilted Avenger. And then now I'm trying to do a floppy comic for Dreaded Dinosaur Man this fall on Indiegogo, and that's the cover that I'm working on here. That's up. So that's kind of my long-winded comics origin story, getting my main characters now fleshed out. So yeah, I'll be updating the webcomic this month with a new chapter at the end of this month, and then try to do one every couple of weeks and build that up until the launch of this book is ready here in the fall.
And Josh, why did you start into comics?
Oh, well, that's a very interesting question. So let me see. I'm just pulling out a quick set of covers real quick that everybody, some people have seen and some haven't. Application window. There we go. And share. There we go. So hello, everybody. My name is Josh again. So I got into comic books quite a bit ago. The short version of my life started, I was born a small African-American child in the middle of Missouri or Alabama. I forget. Something involving a banjo and a white-haired man.
I love the jerk.
There we go. Thankful somebody gets my reference. I had a fairly
I know your dog's name.
childhood. My parents are indeed Christian, but we were military as well. So we ended up moving every so many years. My parents, in a very loving method, I want to emphasize this, really restricted what I listened to and what I watched to feature films for family and Christian-based music, and they really guarded what I watched or read. And so occasionally there would be some Christian comic books like Archangels or Bible Mans or whatever have you, and they let me read Garfield's. And it was one of the few things my dad ever actually collected were Garfield books. And as simple as that sounds, that's a weekday strip, whatever have you. It's still a character that at that time when I was a kid, that character had evolved from like this fat, ugly looking cat to like a bipedal, superhero, as far as his own industry. And that was pretty much the level of what I was able to read. I'd get some Archie comics here and there because that was available at the Base Exchange. But my full jump into comic books was probably right around high school. Right before that, I had started getting some random comics here and there from my my parents. Would be like, here's the Avengers Heroes Reborn, where there's 300 characters on the cover. That kind of stuff, like really powerful, impactful images. And I had been drawing for a while at that point, but right around high school is when things started trying to make a choice. And I was kind of just drawing for fun. And I was like, oh, I'll just go in the military. Or I'll go do computers, whatever have you. Drawing's kind of fun. And I broke my hand and I fell off my bicycle and I just fell the wrong way. And I broke these knuckles in my hand. And again, I'm left-handed. This is my dominant hand. And I had to figure out what the heck I wanted to do with my life. I started realizing I was sitting there in a cast what I want to do. And it was at that point that I said, I want to create art. I really want to. Like, this is my dominant thing. What happens if I lose? So I'm sitting there in a cast trying to draw. We're sitting there in random restaurants with napkins and things like that. And I'm trying to get back on this. Fast forward just a little bit. Long story short, I realized, hey, just in case this becomes a permanent problem, I should probably go into 3D modeling and animation. It will allow me to create and tell stories, but at the same time, I'll be able to rely a little bit on technology being able to fill the void, which is interesting considering how we all started talking about this as far as like virtual models and things like that. I was like, let me do this because I was enamored with Pixar and what they were doing. And at that time, they technically weren't owned by Disney. They were just being distributed. So I went to college. And while I was there, I met a couple of people that were really into comic books. And at that time, I was still not really building a collection just yet. I was really obsessed with obscure characters that had very short runs. So like Sleepwalker for Marvel, or Ragman, or the Creeper, or if you go back to Marvel, Scarlet Spider is probably my favorite character no matter what, because it's the perfect comic book story in the sense of everything that can go wrong in your industry. We can talk about that a little bit later if we want. Happy to, because I have such a love-hate relationship with what happened to that character. But Graduated high school, graduated college, and I was realizing during my first or second year, we were graduating in the middle of a recession, probably wasn't going to work out too well. During my second to last year, I got invited to a Comic-Con, and it was a Heroes Con, which is one of the few shows. I was living on the East Coast at the time, but it's one of the few shows that's very art-centric and very comic book still based. Yes, they're all over the place, and they have movie stars and TV stars and things like this, but Heroes Con really, really focuses on having artists. And I went, and I spent way too much money, especially back then. I was on student loans at the time. But I had such a blast because the first thing I did, I didn't go and buy prints. I bought originals from different artists. And I created a couple of characters while I was sitting there at the show just because I wanted to see how other artists were going to interpret that character. Skip forward about a year, I decided that while I'm graduating, working all my side jobs, that I want to start getting into comics again. But from the actual production side. Just as a real quick aside, when I was in high school, there was this thing that occurred that's fairly tragic called the Columbine situation. This happened right around when I was in middle school and high school. There was a large shooting, and basically it was the outsiders, the people that didn't really fit in with the group. And those people were targeted by guidance counselors and things like that because they were really, really concerned that all of us could be the next Columbine shooter. So I got isolated for a couple of years based on, whatever psychology nonsense because I didn't go and hang out with everybody, and I didn't go and join track and field. Like I actually joined a bunch of sports just so that they would leave me alone. But they actually seized a large portion of the art that I was working on when I was in high school because I was trying to draw comic books. As far as that's concerned, and I was trying to learn, and I had my own characters and my powers, some pet superheroes, a bunch of random other stupid stuff, basically influenced on the cartoons that I'd been able to, grow up and watch. And that really hit me for a while before the college thing. But jumping back again, during the indie circuit on the East Coast, mostly in Virginia and Northern Virginia, there weren't a lot of shows, and I wasn't quite fully aware what to do, but I worked with what indie books would work with me as far as that. I threw myself out on the forums at that time between drawingboard.org and, digital webbing and all those. Like, I don't even know if digital webbing is still around.
It was the best.
What's that?
It was the best, man. Like, that's where I found my artists back in the day. I love digital webbing. I wish it still exists because that was the ground roots community.
Yeah, Pencil Jack was pretty good too.
I was gonna say Pencil Jack as well. And I just learned so much. I met my first proper professionals without that Comic-Con through drawingboard.org. And I think one of the first influences, it's funny because Luke talks about what tragedies are in our lives when it comes to friends and things like that. I was completely rubbish at the time. I didn't quite understand what I was doing wrong, what I needed to improve and things like that. And one of the few people that it took even a remote interest to like just take the time on the forum and comment and make suggestions and things like that was Mike Waringo from Tales of Telos. He's more popular, well known for like creating Impulse, Kid Flash kind of storyline for that, and a few other things. And it was one of my nerd moments. I was like, hey, let's go. I started creating a book. I was ready to go and show it to him. And while I was working on other people's books for free and doing filler art for their backs and doing alternate covers, and he died a couple of months before the event was going down. It was Baltimore Comic-Con. But that kind of soured me for a brief time. And fast forward, I've still done a few covers. Like in this case, this is a series. I've done several other covers that are like show variants and things like that. I'm going to go ahead and see if I can find another one. My File Explorer is being very slow right now, so I'm not too worried about that as a focus. But long story short, I started doing Comic Cons when I moved to Texas. I realized I really wanted to focus on doing art after having all those emotional life's ups and downs and struggles, and dealing with working in retail and working in offices and working in printing and working in all these other things. I spent a couple of years just going to Comic Cons and talking to artists and figuring out what the things are that we hate and what the things are that we don't like. I took on random sketch card gigs. I took covers. I took all of these little things here and there that didn't pay a lot of money. And sure enough, I slowly started trying to put together something that could work. And Luke was mentioning it earlier. One of the things I do is these cute chibi card fan art things. When I originally started that, I was trying to figure out how to develop a style as far as art was concerned. And one of my bigger influences was an artist named Chris Giarrusso, because he broke the mold in the sense of he was somebody who worked for Marvel who couldn't draw comic book art as far as what was considered the standard norm. He drew something very bouncy, very influenced. And so I was trying to emulate that when I created those. And that slowly became a thing. It helped provide a filler and a backer. And I guess if you fast forward, I've been a convention artist primarily for the last 8 years, going on 9. And I still do variants when I can, but every once in a while, things come up and can't finish a project on time, or, you're in the middle of a convention season and suddenly you've got to go 2 days to the next class. So I took a break for about a year now. And Eric and I have been on the road for the last 3 or 4 years now, ups and downs. And I think what happens with us when you're on the road as a convention artist is you end up sitting there and going, I don't want to, just create just for fans. I want to create something better, but I'm so tired of people just going, oh, I love this show. I love this movie. I only love the movie version of this character. And that can be exhausting when you're doing fan art. It really can. But at the same time, once again, Luke and Eric, it pays the bills. During what's going down right now with all the events that have been canceled, the number one thing that's been paying my bills are commissions. 100% one-of-one pieces that don't get turned into prints. And it's one of those weird conundrums that we always deal with. But on a broader scheme, as far as what got me into comics, was the fact that it's like, yes, you could work by yourself 100%, and you could do your own pencils, and you can do your own inks, and you can do your own colors, or you can hire somebody to help you. I will say this. I think one of my diva moments is anytime I hear the words, it's good exposure. I instantly cringe and just put this person in a mental block. I'm not going to work for you. Exposure. But it really, and this is one of those industries where we do have to work together from time to time and work for free. There's so many artists out there that work in collaboration where they trade covers for covers, or, hey, I'll do your flats if you do my inks, the tedious things you swap out back and forth. And it really it comes down to time. Everything that we do as artists is fleeting. It's not going to survive the test of time. I'm sorry. We are not going to be somebody 2 centuries from now that everybody is going to go, oh my God, this is great. But we're telling stories, and we're providing art, and we're providing entertainment in that level. And I don't know, it seems a little off topic as far as that's concerned, but I think for me, the ability to take the old tropes and the old stories, if you can turn a man into a monster, and how does that man deal with being the monster? Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, i.e. the Incredible Hulk. You take the rejects of society and you make them, you deal with actual cultural issues of racism and discrimination based on religion or anything else, and you can tell this story in another motif. These are the reasons we get to tell comics. It's something lighthearted, but at the same time, we can touch on serious topics. So I like being able to express things visually. And for me, I thoroughly admit, I mentioned a couple of podcasts back, is like, I'm a middleman. I know pretty much average. I'm not even a jack of all trades. I'm a jack of limited trades. I can move back and forth. I can do flatting for one person who looks like a Turner knockoff because Turner passed away, but I'm not going to get credit for that. But at the same time, I can ink for someone else. I can do my own, but eventually I will get my own books done. But for now, I just want to be that person that helps other people with their works. Which, not to jump back to the beginning of the conversation too much, this is why these kinds of things will weigh down on you when you think about it. When I'm watching a Kickstarter and my job is to be critical, it's it's not one of the trades I want to be, but at the same time, I have to know what I like and what I don't like, and I also have to be able to back and make my mistakes and admit my mistakes. So again, anyways, I'm gonna shut up. Rob, your turn.
Yeah, Rob, how'd you get into this
Know how
business?
I started. Everyone knows the story. Dyslexic kid, couldn't read, fell in love with comic books thanks to the X-Men and the Pride of the X-Men. Found out there was only one cartoon because back then there was only pilots. We didn't get a whole season. Had to run to the local store. Had to grab comic books, put the title X-Men next to a dictionary. Found out that none of the characters from Pride of X-Men, except for Wolverine and Kitty Pryde, was sort of there, but in the background was there. I fell in love with Gambit and Rogue. Thanks to a dictionary, I taught myself to read one word at a time. So it's one of those things I owe comics, and I'll never be able to repay them enough for actually giving me the ability to read and actually show my intelligence. So that's why I do what I do. But let's talk about the future. We've been on for 90 minutes. I want to leave with a positive note. So for each one of you, let's talk about the future of what you're creating. What are you guys going to be releasing in the next year or two that you're super proud of? I'll start real quick by saying that I'm really proud of the work I'm going to be doing with The Advocator. I'm proud of Cat Dad and Supermom getting a sequel, the second book, and Barbara Unleashed, which we did have to push till 2021. It has an exciting new story arc that will start next year, and this year we're going to put her into a trade. So I'm pretty excited about the year ahead. Few other projects I can't really mention yet. You guys know the deal. Until it's ready to be talked about, you can't talk about it. So you could expect maybe 2 or 3 other projects, and I'll be having my first novel released this year. I'm actually going to Straight Prose, and Boyer, the editor, is going to hate me. So that's me. Let's pass it over to Luke Stone, who's not paying attention. I just want to put him on.
Yeah, well, as right now I've got Hybrids, the last issue of this first arc on Kickstarter, so I'm pretty proud of that. It's working out pretty good. Working with a new editor, like really honestly working with the editor to get the books better. I've got some stuff in the works with Travis Gibb. Looking forward to those things. I've got another a project I'm working on called Saint. It's going to be kind of a 2 or 3 issue kind of longer books, but they are kind of the psychological thriller stuff that I like to work on, and so excited about that. I'm in the midst of writing 2 other arcs that connect to the Hybrids universe. One is the Hybrids arc for Love Lost. It's issues 6 through 9, 6 through 10. I don't know what it's going to be, but and then another one called Armageddon Watch. So that's kind of a futuristic dystopian future of some of the characters from all of the Starcross creators, all kind of melded together. And then just some other things that are right now in the dream stage, and I'm looking forward to seeing what happens with those.
Well, yes, I am hard at work on Dreaded Dinosaur Man. The webtoon is going to be my priority, as I'm also working on this book to build up to the fall. I am really looking forward to wrapping up the final few pages of Roddy Piper and the Kilted Avenger, seeing that book on the shelf, seeing that book on my table. And I'm hoping to also, I've also got an inking project that I'm working on for a hockey comic. And I am looking for cover work in the independent scene. I really want to do, part of me commiserates with Josh wanting to add my flavor to what other people are doing. So I definitely would like to avail myself in the indie scene for cover work while I'm working on my sequentials for this book. And then, I want to keep it going. I want the second paper comic that I put out for Dread Dinosaur Man to be a collaborative effort. So I'm looking for writers. I want to put together other art teams and have a nice little anthology of stories for the second book. So I'm already in the pre-planning phases for looking at. I'm always future forward, always thinking about what the next thing is going to be. And in my spare time, I'm learning how to code in GDScript and Python so I can make some video games, and definitely want to keep my 3D skills brushed up and get my printer out, because I'd love to in the fall have a small Dinosaur Man themed action figure as a premium item for the comic book. So that's one of my other plans. Lots of plans.
Josh, what does the future hold for you?
That's an excellent question. So I guess on the simple, I mentioned briefly before, I committed to working on one of these stories for Eric for the Dreaded Dinosaur Man. So now that we have a lot more free time, I actually have the ability to work on that a little bit. So I'm excited for that. For a 1 to 2 year plan, one thing I forgot to mention during my random little monologue there is that I made a choice when I chose to go to fan art that I was doing that to purely build a fan base audience because I wanted to be able to create more comic books and have an audience that I could reach via Kickstarters and things like that instead of starting from scratch. And it's something that I've been putting on for quite some time. And like I said, during last year, I realized that I was just getting kind of worn down with just sitting there and not having anything to talk about except for like the passion of creating the one piece on the character, and the research related to that fan art of that character. So for my own works, I have scripts written. I need to finish out my layouts. I already got my covers laid out in contrast for one series. My working title right now is Doom Spoon. It's basically Borrowers meets Rescuers Down Under meets A Midsummer's Night's Dream. I like focusing on some fantasy elements as far as like elves and brownies and pixies and things like that. And I really want to play with the concept of being able to use larger than life. And like, here's an actual spoon. Here's they're sitting there and they're hiding inside a mayonnaise jar. These are the creatures that are among us, kind of thing, and how they help solve the issues. Give a nice retelling of like the elves and the shoe cobbler stuff. And then the other thing is actually something I've been wanting to finish out for quite some time. I was originally going to be doing 6 trades for this, and I think now we're going to limit it just a little bit. But it's an anthology series, penciled, inked, written, colored by me, possibly lettered by someone else, possibly lettered by me. We'll see. I got some of it finished already. It's I'm calling it 6-Shot Revolver. It'll allow me to tell 6 different stories in every single book, and just be able to switch back and forth between genres with public domain storylines as far as characters. Like, for example, Wonderful Wizard of Oz is based on an L. Frank Baum. Lyman, ironically. Lyman is what that L stands for. Where I can tell my own tales of that. So I could do a Tales from Oz storyline. And just some stuff I need to just dedicate and spend some time once a week and get back into the passion of doing those projects. So, other than that, I am reaching out to random projects and going, hey, I'll do variant covers for trade copies, and just kind of working with who I can. Hey, just give me some issues that I can sell. So basically, you cover the cost of that, and then I get to sell the original. So hopefully going to be working with a couple of people out of Phoenix in regards to that as well. Providing that people don't pass away. But more on that later.
And Travis, take us home.
Take you home. Where you want to go? Where do you live?
West Virginia.
Mountain Mama.
Sorry to hear you don't have anything in the future coming.
Every one of us. Terrible.
Well, I mean, I'm trying to figure out how to go out to you and pick up my comics very soon, so we'll have to see that. Give me one more second. I'm kind of opening up Windows,
same thing.
Yeah, I'm kind of opening up Windows so I can show you guys some things and make it easy for everybody. So I just need one more second to do that and tell you what I'm working on. But let me tell you about some of the underground stuff that I'm working on. So yeah, Luke Stone and I are working on something that'll be kind of cool. We just recently met each other. We're actually working on 2 projects. One of them is an anthology, and one of them is small ongoing that I kind of was just kind of showing him. And he's like, I like that. And then he was like, can I draw that? And I was like, maybe, let's talk. And we're working it out. Like that. And we'll see how that works out. So I'm going to share my screen if that's cool. And then we'll go from there. And I'll show you all the cool things that are going on. Oh, actually, hold on. Before I want to do that, I wanted to read something. So one of my biggest things that we're working on is called Cthulhu Invades Oz. This is coming out in October. What I did was I grabbed my favorite indie guys and the biggest names that I had, and kind of put them all together in this anthology. We started it last year, and now we're starting to get into getting a lot of the pages in. Let me tell you some of the names we've got. We've got myself. We've got Kurt Belcher. He does there's a couple of things over at Source Point Press. We've got David Byrne, just did that $10,000 Kickstarter for Stake. We've got Brian Silverback. He's all over the place lately. He's got Loggerhead, all sorts of variant covers for all sorts of companies. Jamie Permack is going to be here. She does, I can't think of the name of her book right now. I don't know. Binary Star. Joel Rodriguez. He does, I'm struggling. What is going on today? My brain is fried.
Dust County Chronicles.
Dust County Chronicles. Thank you. We got Chuck Pinu. Everyone knows Chuck. We got Richard Rivera, Stabby Bunnies. We got Russell Maltese for all of his thousands of things that he does.
Bunnies cover.
What's that?
I was saying I'd love to do a Stabby Bunnies. I got that taken care of pretty solid.
We've got who else? We got Mr. Rob Anderson. We got Caleb. We got Greg Elises is going to do the Wizard. We got Tyler Carpenter. We also have a guy who just did Savage Bastards over from Mad Cave, Dag Guglielmi. And now, without further ado, I'm going to share the logo because this is the first time people have seen it publicly. So it's going to be pretty exciting. You guys see application windows. Let's see. Chrome tabs? I don't know how to find that. Interesting.
Everyone's computers are acting kind of weird tonight. I noticed that.
I think it would be this.
It's all a conspiracy.
Yeah, here it is. Okay. So this is the logo. If you guys want to check it out, it's pretty cool. I like it. That's the color in the black and white. Can you guys see that?
That's cool.
I can see 3 guys, but I see no logo.
Yeah, broke down. We're seeing a broke down screen.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like 3 guys split. Like it's a Rasputin.
Why can't I share? That's weird that I can't. Oh, I have to share each individual tab?
No, you just have
to like choose which one of the windows you want to show if you've got them opened up.
You must have it open in the background. You don't realize it.
Hold on.
You're showing the wrong window. That's all. But that's broke down in 3 dead bodies for the record.
That's 4 dead bodies, and we can talk about that in just a second. Hold on. Let me try one more time. Sorry about that.
He added another body.
I actually got to 5 in that comment.
You're looking for a great cult film. There's a movie called 9 Dead Gay Guys. It is very hilarious.
That does sound fantastic.
It's designed to be a very Guy Ritchie-esque
film. Can we see it now?
But heavy on the comedy.
We can. You're good.
Yeah. So that's Cthulhu Invade Oz. That's going to come out in October. That's going to be really, really cool.
Invading. That's nice.
So basically what the concept is unlike other anthologies where they just have a whole bunch of stories that are kind of thrown together, these all share the same universe. This book has a beginning and an end, but I didn't control everybody. Everybody got one character, and I basically tell things as they happen. So Dorothy sells out Oz, Cthulhu invades Oz, and all the creatures from Lovecraft come invade Oz. So we've got the Tin Men dealing with Cthulhu himself. We've got people dealing with the Man in Yellow. We've got Deep Ones. We've got all those different adventures. Some people live, some people die.
So, forgive my curiosity.
Okay.
Does it start almost like a draw after situation? So, like, for example, if this person draws Tin Man this way, then everyone else has to draw Tin Man that way?
So they can't necessarily use the same story with character without being known, but everyone has a mock-up of what the character looks like. Okay. So the Tin Man's drawn, everyone knows what that is. So if everybody has him in a picture in the background or something, but they're not supposed to use the characters. A couple of them have crossed over in other stories, but for the most part, each of them have. Oz is a big place, so we can, kind of separate them.
Oh, absolutely. You got the China dolls. You got all sorts of fun stuff.
Yeah, you got the City of Rose. You got all sorts of.
You got all those other books.
I've got. I think when I did the math, it ended up being like 60-something creators at 120 pages. It is an epic book. It's going to be probably my biggest Kickstarter to date. I'm super excited about. Rob can tell you. I don't feel comfortable showing you the art yet, but some of the art is amazing, top notch. So it's super exciting. We're getting everything ramped up. You guys are going to be seeing a lot of stuff. I'm going to start promoting this April. So it's going to be pretty cool to start seeing some of the pages, start asking friends for pinups and stuff like that. So it's going to be a cool book. All right, next we'll go to Broke Down. All right, so I stopped sharing that. Go back to the thing. This is kind of a pain in the ass the way this is done. All right, so we've got. Let's go back to that Broke Down page. Is that here? No, that's my comic book. That is not it. That is my website, which is cool. But I wanted to show you. Actually, I'm a show and teller, so I'm sorry if I'm boring you. And let's see, where did
No, I'm like, I don't know. I'm an 80s kid, so I'm a little socially distracted.
Right, I feel you.
I will always be that horrible middle ground. That's the worst part of this whole thing, is I will always be that guy in the middle of both genres.
What is going on? All right, I'm just going to talk about everything because nothing of my stuff is sharing right, and it makes me sad. I just want to share my other tab. How is that not possible?
Let me show you.
You must close the one and then reopen.
I've got all sorts of tabs open, and I don't know which one's what anymore. It's all ridiculous.
The college professor mistake, while streaming.
All right. Anyways, I'm going to stop sharing. All right. Because you guys can't see my pages anyways. I don't know what you guys are even looking at right now.
Just the 5 of us.
All right. So Broke Down in 4 Dead Bodies. We just finished it up. I was going to show you guys the cool pages of art and show you that it was all finished. Apparently, you don't get to see that. But it is. Trust me. It's all done. It's really cool. Another 28-page book. We just started issue 3. Issue 4, it's going to be 32 pages. Super excited to get that out for you guys. That'll finish up that series. We've got the Advocator 2020. So what the Advocator is, we just announced that earlier this week. Advocator 2020 is going to be a trade paperback. It is a basically from 4 to 10 pages. You submit your story. What it's designed for is for people who want to get another book out this year. So let's say, it takes you a long time to get a book out. This allows you to submit a story into this and get it with other people to build your book. Nobody gets any money. We funded on Kickstarter. We funded 3 last year. And basically what we do is we split the copies of the books and share them amongst each other. So everybody can get books to start their adventure, to sell at tables, so they can make money to make the book that you really want to make, or to help you kill time before your next issue comes out. So it's a labor of love. Me, Rob Anderson, and Chuck spearhead that project. I know it's April. We probably should have talked about it in January, but we finally got around to submitting. We already have 2 submissions already, not counting the ones that we already lined up from last year. So that's going to be a crazy thing. Last thing that I want to talk about is kind of crazy. Ready? You ready for this, Rob? Rob.
We'll assume he's ready.
Damn it, Rob.
He's got like a 2-second delay with the mute button.
I'm a cripple, man. It's not easy to get around right now. I have a sciatic hip. I can barely walk. What? Show me.
Oh, Eric, why don't you relate to that a little bit? Sympathize.
Evil man. What?
That's offensive. So all this, let's talk about Marcel Dupree for just a minute. So this recent debate with Tyler caused some tension. So I have a book called Dog Days that is about a year behind because of him. It's a 120-page graphic novel that I wrote. It is 4 issues in at 20 pages each. So we still have quite a bit to go. But because of the debate and because of Rob's questions and because of my questions, we have hired a new artist to kind of finish it up, to get it taken care of. Me and him didn't have a contract. That contract's being written to give me some security to feel comfortable to sharing my scripts, because I don't trust Marcel, so I didn't want to share my script. So that's going to be fixed, and hopefully we'll get a book out this year. So that'll be exciting. I mean, obviously it's Marcel, so words are don't mean a lot. Actions mean more, but it's a start, right, Rob?
Yeah, I'll believe it when I see a book in my hand. Not before then.
Right, I feel you, but it's a positive thing for me, because that book has been a thorn in my side. Even though I raised really good funds on Kickstarter, it does slow down my production. It does make me feel nervous about launching something new into the world. So let's get it finished and let's get it done. Because Luke and I are working on something. I'm going to have Luke a script within the next couple of days. I don't mess around with this stuff. Like, I'm very serious about making comics. So if you want to make comics with me, we're going to make comics. And we're going to do it fast. We're going to get it done, and we're going to get it out there.
It's a good way to look at it.
It's a good way to do it.
Right,
mean,
right. Let's not
think-
talk about it. And you
Pull a Rob Liefeld with Fighting American here.
have, so you take Cap back?
You remember that? You remember that?
Yeah.
For anybody listening, long story short, Rob failed to meet a deadline years ago, and then they decided to cancel the book. And so he decided that he was going to finish out the story with the writing and everything, as far as production was concerned, which oddly enough ties into what we were talking about earlier.
But here's the funniest thing, though, where it gets. So he used Fighting American, which happened before Cap,
True.
but he used a lot of Cap stuff, and then
Yeah.
he found out he couldn't use Fighting American and lost that.
Exactly. Yeah. He was like, "Oh, well, this is public domain." I'm like, "No, it's not." So just wait for Marcel to pop out his story. See what happens.
Right,
Probably-
exactly. That's why I don't want to get in the script.
You're not allowed anymore. I changed it.
Well, I appreciate you all sitting around the round table with us. I've got a 5-year-old to get to bed, so it's time to say goodbye. I think everyone knows where to follow us, but just real quick, name, website to follow you, and we're going to get out of here. We're going to let Luke Stone start it, because, again, he's not looking.
Yep. Just doing a little work while we're talking. So you can find my work at LukeStoneStudios.com. You can also find me on Twitter at LukeStoneStudio. Be sure to go to Facebook and like my art page called Luke Stone Studios. I do a little photography there, do a little art. It's mostly populated with comic book stuff these days. And a lot of my Kickstarter. Right now I'm offering anyone that would like a free copy of issue 1 of Hybrids. And if you like that, please go buy my Kickstarter. You know where Kickstarter's at. And there's links all over the place. So if you go there, give it a look, maybe just drop $1 and share that project for me. We are 2 backers away right now from hitting 35. And as soon as we do that, everyone who does a physical copy or does a physical tier will get a free exclusive trading card along with that. And then we also have some really cool things over there that you can check out. We've got the Hard Times pack, where it's like a super value pack to get all 5 physical copies. We've got the physical pack, the Hard Times pack with the Serafina book attached to it. We've got some new digital perks over there where you can get the number 1s from Starcross. We just got a lot of things going on over there, and every week we try to add something new in. So make sure to go over there and check that out. And
How many more weeks you got?
I've got 17 days.
17. All right. So less than 3 weeks. Just barely over to.
Yep.
Barely over to. So hurry.
All right, so we're going to do elimination style to celebrate WrestleMania. So we're going to show all the creators and then slowly stop on the one that gets to say it next. I don't know. I'm looking forward to WrestleMania. So obviously I'm going to.
That's not how WrestleMania works. That's Royal Rumble.
No, that's Elimination Chamber, actually.
Elimination Chamber.
I think we just wanted to play with a new toy.
Yes, I just want WrestleMania is coming. So,
Cycle it all out. Yes, my name is Eric Hodson. I have this newfangled thing called a website that I redesigned. EricHodson.com. That's ErikHodson. You'll find a link there to buy some of my awesome wrestling art and anime art. And it's a nice little portfolio. It'll take you to my Instagram at Dreaded Dinosaur. And lots of cool, fun things. And reach out, send me a DM if you want to do a commission or something. I'd be more than happy.
Say, Luke, he's actually got a really cool wrestling homage to that Hulk cover holding up the Earth and stuff.
Oh, really? I could check that out.
Yeah, it looks pretty good. I'm not even into wrestling, and I'm like, that's not bad. So for me, guys, you can find me at Art of Josh Lyman on Instagram and on the Facebook. You just type in Art of Josh Lyman. You can kind of find me on Twitter. I finally caved in and started posting art on there, so now I'm going to have to choose my words even more wisely when I post on there. And I will be having a website during the next week. Right now, I am doing commissions, of course, like much everybody else. I'm not selling prints because I'm kind of trying to find a new direction as far as artwork is concerned. So I have my metal cards, but I'm mostly focusing on sketch covers and 5x7 originals. Info for that is on the pages themselves. And other than that, if you're just bored and you just want to scroll through and see a bunch of art, that's me.
Yeah, if someone knows who Portal and Evil Hawk are, it'll be really relevant.
Well, there's also Overhawk. And
Overhark, yeah.
yeah, there's also for modern comic book fans, there's Venomized Carnage as well as the Null Carnage and a Null Venom, which is a completely opposite character.
Right, but Portal, like
Yeah, I tore open a portal. I 100% drew a bunch of Darkhawk characters.
I love
there's
Darkhawk.
a niche comic book group that is obsessed with Darkhawk, and I'm like, what? Go where the money is. Let's be blunt. Sometimes you gotta go. Hey, I will draw the thing that I know somebody wants because they want it, and that's always a fine line.
Of your niche runs, do you own the Green Goblin run? That was back in the day, where he was good for a little bit. Someone found his thing.
Eric with the who becomes the blue whale. Yeah.
Yeah. That is such a good, amazing run of crazy random villains that don't make sense.
I have literally every single issue of the Amalgam comic books.
Nice.
Spider Boy with the Legion of Superheroes, and I believe I'm missing a variant of the Superman, Captain America, Man of Steel. Like I have the other one, but I just don't have that. I collect reader copies. I love anything that you can tell a story, and when there's too much collaboration, it just goes to pot, and at the same time can create, and you can learn from that. Like the Frankenstein Superman, the Superman monster, great story. Gotham by Gaslight, it's the same genre, but for me, I don't really like. It's one of those weird conundrums. But I digress. Sure. Your turn, dude.
Yes, Travis Gibb. You can find me at brokedownfourdebodies.com. You can find me on Facebook at Travis Gibb or on Instagram and Twitter at Jesterlou, JesterLou. I can't tell you why, but one day you'll know why I have that profile name.
MIC.
And thank you all for being here. You can find me trying to figure out how to go to the bathroom with the sciatic nerve issue and no toilet paper. But if you want to find out what I'm doing outside of the bathroom, go to MrAnderson.com. Thank you, guys.
Mr. Anderson.
And I will see you at the next panel panel. I think I have a panel next. 4 p.m. tomorrow. Thanks for tuning in. This is a presentation of the OnCon Network and my part, IndieAdvocates.com. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Good night.